Forum, everyone. My name is David Lapp. I'm the director of We the People's Project here at Braver Angels. I live in South Lebanon, Ohio, just a little bit north of Cincinnati, where we had the first ever Braver Angels workshop, by the way, a little bit after the 2016 election. So We the People's Forum, the purpose here is to hear from everyday Americans on the issues of the day. We hear from people of all races, classes, places, and politics. And we have a particular focus and interest in hearing from working class everyday Americans, people who we often don't get to hear from on the issues of the day. So our goals tonight at this We the People's Forum on the 2022 elections is a better understanding of the experiences and perspectives of some everyday Americans about the 2022 elections, and discuss areas of common ground in addition to acknowledging and respecting differences, and learning something that might be helpful to others in our country. And our We the People's Forum tonight has three parts. First, it's a discussion with our first speakers. And then we're going to have what we call Q&A time, questions and experiences. So that's when we open it up to you all. And anyone at that point is welcome to ask one of the speakers a question, or you're welcome to share a comment and talk about how a life experience has shaped your perspective on the 2022 elections. And if you do make a comment, we ask that you make it in 3 minutes or less. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some possible next steps as well. So, and our ground rules for tonight are the same Braver Angels ground rules that we use for many of our workshops. First, we're here to understand others and to explain our views, not to convince anyone to change their mind. Second, let's each speak for ourselves and not try to represent any outside group. Third, let's stick to the spirit of the activities designed for each stage of the meeting. For example, if the activity is sharing our own perspective or experiences of the issue or asking a question, that's all we do then, even if it means resisting the urge to expound further upon our own opinion. And otherwise, it's standard stuff we all know: taking turns, not interrupting others, listening to everyone, being respectful, as in no eye rolling or loud sighs when someone is speaking, etc. In other words, bringing our best selves to a difficult conversation. And we do have, for our first speakers tonight, we have, unfortunately, we had one of our first speakers, Charles Stallworth, is probably not going to be able to join us tonight because he's a union railroad worker in Houston, Texas. And you might read about this in the papers tomorrow, but the railroad workers are going on strike, or they're about to. And so he's been pulled into a union meeting. And if he's at all possible, he's going to join us, but he's on a train in a union meeting. And so that's why he can't be here with us tonight. But by the way, so that you know, Charles Stallworth, he leans conservative, and his writing has been published at newsweek.com, including the article, "I asked 100 fellow blue-collar workers to name their top concerns, and they all said the same thing." That's an article worth checking out after tonight's forum. I think you'd find it interesting. Chris Adams. And Chris, give us a wave. Chris is a 37-year-old father of 4 boys. And he describes himself as very handy, jack of all trades, master of none. He is a U.S. Marine Corps veteran. He served during the Iraq War, 2007-2009. And he's passionate about saving the earth, preserving humanity, and taking care of family. His first job was at a nursing home in the kitchen as a server dishwasher. And currently, he's a high-voltage lineman foreman employed out of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. So, Chris, thanks for joining us tonight. And Stacy Gadati. Stacy, go ahead and give us a wave at us. Stacy is an Iberian woman, a Nana, and a mother from Corvallis, Oregon. She was an organic farmer for almost 30 years, and she is today a multimedia artist. She describes herself as being she's been part of the working poor and has experienced houselessness. She's presently launching the Form Production Company that seeks to implement creative works for social and environmental causes. And Carlos Aviles. Carlos, wave at us. And Carlos is a 3rd-generation Puerto Rican native. He was in the Army as an MP for over 4 years and has over 11 years experience working in Temple's inpatient pharmacy in Philadelphia. And his proudest affiliation at Temple is being a PASNAP union member, and he is currently president of his local union. So, Carlos, Stacy, Chris, welcome to We the People's Forum. We're really honored that you're taking time here to share your perspectives. So I'm going to start with you, Chris, if that's okay. And so just tell us in your own words, what's on your mind about the 2022 elections? Give us a sense of the issue or issues that you care about as you think about whether and how to vote in the 2022 elections. And I guess we could note too that you are in Pennsylvania, which of course has some important races. There's an important Senate race there, and there's an important governor's race. So, Chris, in about 4 minutes or so, tell us what's on your mind about the 2022 elections. Oh, go ahead and unmute yourself, Chris. There you go.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Yeah, it's, no surprise, it's pretty polarizing. There's a lot being said about Fetterman. He's going to let all these murderers free on the streets. And Dr. Oz, I'm sure everybody's familiar with him. He's running for our Senate as well. I'm sure he's a snake oil salesman. Who knows? So what's the lesser of two evils? Kind of seems like that's where we're always at a standpoint. What is the lesser of two evils here? Me personally, I see a lot of our tax dollars being spent in ways that I don't agree with when it comes to the Democratic Party. Republicans, on the other hand, tend to maybe cater too much to, we'll say, the big business and everything. So where's the middle ground? Is paying off these student loans. I know that's kind of more federal. That's not quite the 22 elections yet, but the thinking is still in line and everything. So important to me is just I don't know, that I don't like to tend to sway too much towards too radical of ideas, which I find that we're getting a lot more on the left side. And just trying to kind of stay right in the middle is kind of more my space. It's just tough waters to navigate. I used to be so much more in line politically when I was overseas, because it just made a lot more sense. It was something that you had to deal with every day. When I was overseas, Obama was in office, and it wasn't fun for us because it was our lives as well. We were making decisions that standard operating procedures dictated what our fate would be, whether or not we were in danger or not. It's hard to say back here, well, that was the right decision. So it's hard for these politicians to really garnish these decisions upon us working class people. And they're just I just feel like both sides are just so far kind of gone from reality, in touch with what we really need as a society and everything. We definitely, where I lean towards on the, we could say the left maybe, is just climate change and everything. It's very real. It's happening. We need to do a better job. Recycling, I'm an advocate for that. We need to do a better job. You can't get rid of TVs now. You can't recycle your refrigerant. I mean, what the hell are you supposed to do? Leave it in your yard? It's kind of crazy. You don't hear these politicians talking about that, and that those are all
climate change is an issue important for you.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a huge environmental crisis that we have, and now, there's a huge push on the left for, electric cars, electric vehicles. Let's get away from petroleum, but we're not talking about the mining of lithium and stuff like that, which is, if you look at the carbon footprint of an electric vehicle, I'm told, or I've seen and read, that it's larger than that of a petroleum-based vehicle. So there's just so many things. It's a tough.
Yeah. And Chris, if you had to just summarize, like in a minute or 30 seconds to a minute, the one or two other top issues that are top of mind for you in the what would you say are one or two other top issues that you care about entering the 2022 elections?
Just kind of radical precedents that they're pushing as far as different gender ideology, however you want to frame it, as far as like schools, they're pushing for multi-gender bathrooms and stuff like that. I just personally don't find that very appropriate. I don't think that school age children, just don't think that that's quite in line with what their focus should be, if that makes sense to anybody. I think
Issues
that
involving curriculum and parents and school children, some of those issues are at the top of mind for you.
Sure. Yeah, 100%. Yep.
Mm-hmm. All right. Anything else you want to touch on, Chris, before we go to the next person?
I'm sure I missed something, but carry on. We'll get to it.
All right, great.
Thank you so
let's
much.
go to Stacy. Stacy, I'm gonna bring you in here. If you could give us a sense for you, what's on your mind about the 2022 elections and some of the 1, 2, or 3 issues that are top of mind for you as you're thinking about the election season. And we should note you're in Oregon, and you do have an interesting governor's race there, where you have a former Democrat, now independent candidate who's been gaining some attention in the race, Betsy Johnson. So, but yeah, Stacy, tell us about you and what's on your mind about the 2022 elections, and give us a sense of 1, 2, or 3 issues.
You bet. So I look at words, and the meaning of liberal is open-handed generosity, and the meaning of conserve.
And Stacy, if you could just lean in a little bit and speak up a little bit so we can hear you better.
Yeah. And the meaning of conserve is to protect culture and environment. So, in my mind, we've gotten a long way from the meaning of these words. So my first, I identify really as the exhausted majority, which my color of my party now is purple. So the first hard conversation with my country that has been burning on my heart is the divide, the inequities along the racial divide, and how this racial divide is actually institutionalized, and how the institutionalization of this divide erodes the very fabric of democracy. There's food deserts in Black communities that stem from the redlining. In my own state, which is historically I think it's one of the 6 top racist states in the nation. We just, I think a year ago, adopted the unanimous jury. And we are now in a constitutional crisis because we don't even have 38% of public defenders. And the fact that the BIPOC community is disproportionately represented in the penal system really speaks to this institutionalization that I'm speaking of. My second issue, coming out of farming, but also the fact that we are on fire on the West, is the environment and how that is going to affect my grandchildren. Without good air, good soil, and good water, we do not have a society. We can't even think about democracy. So our food chain is in crisis. It's been in crisis for years. And the third issue that really speaks to how we got here in this polarization is how this divide is fueled by political rhetoric. We all need to understand the definition of the words we are using. And political rhetoric is a tool. It's an art. It's been used since, the academy in Greece, when philosophy started. Well, when the Western philosophy started. And so I really want to get to the bottom of how this divide is actually perpetrated, and it is really the language that we use every day that often we don't even know.
So you're concerned about issues of racism, the environment and the food chain, and then political rhetoric, and
Yes,
how
and
that's
how
fueling our political divides.
yes, and how it's used as a tool actually
Mm.
to keep the emotion high. We have a republic, so try to get three people ordering the same sandwich. That is the democracy, but the idea of democracy is very powerful, and it's also very emotive. And what we are doing here is trying to reach neutrality and not reactivity.
Mhm,
And I
mhm.
so thank you for this.
And you said that
And
you identify as part of the exhausted majority. I know that
yes,
you've told me that you have voted Democratic in the past. Are you thinking you might vote Democratic this time around, or you're not sure? How are you thinking about how you might vote?
I'm not sure. I am really not sure. I'm actually waiting, through this conundrum of what we experienced last election cycle. This Cheney is really stood out for me. For the fact is, she's not dramatic at all.
You talk about Liz
She,
Cheney, the congresswoman from Wyoming.
yeah, and I don't know if she's running, but I really have been appreciating her work and her sensibility
Mhm,
and the issues that she is looking at. But I haven't delved deep into all of her issues about the environment and racism and stuff like that. So I don't
mhm.
really know.
But she was
But
an
I think,
example of a politician whom you find yourself interested in, and you would like to
yeah,
see more politicians like that.
and that's the first time I've ever, thought about the possibility of voting outside of a democratic forum. So,
Mm,
it's and both of my parents. I'm a daughter of an Air Force general, so both of my parents voted
mhm,
always voted Republican, and of
mhm,
course we always had amazing uh, conversations. You know, but like I said, what I'm really concerned about is getting to solution for
mhm,
humanity, and everybody gets counted.
mhm,
Nobody's left out in that
mm,
discussion,
mhm. All
and
right.
representation is equal.
Mm. Thank you, Stacy. Let's go to you, Carlos. And by the way, I see a hand up. We're going to wait until um, a little bit later to where we will open it up to the Zoom audience. You have a chance to ask the speakers questions and to weigh in with your own comments as well. But let's wait for that part of this forum. For now, let's go to Carlos. Carlos, tell us for you what's on your mind about the 2022 elections, and you're in Pennsylvania as well, just as Chris. So give us a sense of the 1, 2, or 3 issues that you're thinking about.
Well, for me, for the most part, I've always voted with the Democratic Party, with my affiliation. But I think with a lot of the issues at current circumstances, it's going to be very hard for me to determine who I'm voting for based upon what I see happening. And I think when I list my 3 issues, my top priority issue will be a little biased because of the job I work in and how impactful it has been in helping all of us be here and get through this pandemic. And I think my number one issue is going to be healthcare and how both parties have forgotten and abandoned what is most important to Americans and society today. And I say this because, look, I've been on the front line. I've been working every day for the last 2.5 years throughout the pandemic. Numerous people, regardless of being Republican, being liberal, Democrat, whatever your beliefs are, we stood together as humanitarians to do a job. And I think what is bothering me and what's helping me stay very unsteady and who I'm voting for is just who is going to actually perform what they're saying. Right now, regardless of our political beliefs, we're not going to exist without protecting the people, without giving resources to the American citizens. And I say this because as a vet, I know what we do for outside nations and people, but I question how much resources we invest into our own people. And these are choices that are being made by both Democrat and Republicans. I believe it's the government that's failing us right now because of these political rhetorics and the things that are happening. Even with the vaccine distribution and how frontline people are taking care. I've seen 50% of the people I've worked with for over 12 years quit on the spot due to treatment, due to the government forgetting about us. And when we do get sick, what happens afterwards? And that's just to the front line. Imagine what's happening to the normal middle-class citizen that I represent. Because I'm not rich by no means. I work every day. I work overtime. I'm proud of who I am and what I do. I'm proud of the country that I represent. But I'm very disappointed right now in how our government is reacting. And we're not coming together. And I would think that a pandemic, something so threatening, would have brought out more. And it really hasn't. It actually has showed us the ugly side of all parties and how we're not willing to come together. And I mean, my second biggest issue would be, you know, through the pandemic and through a lot of the politic games that are happening, the inequalities that we have when it comes to minorities in the system and to a lot of these poor rural areas across all states in the country. You know, resources are not being given to everybody. And we know even from big cities like New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, and the beginning of the pandemic, all we saw was horrific pictures of tractor trailers being filled with bodies. You know, I would think and I will pray that moving forward, our response will be better. But I will also think that sources and all those resources get equally given to all parties in all areas where we stay at. Because what we forget to realize is a lot of times in the poor rural areas, well, we don't take care of those people and they come to our hospitals, they bring all that to us as well. So it's a life cycle. And we have to do better as taking care of each other, especially in critical times. And I know that regardless of what we do as people, the government is still run in a way that, you know, lower class people, regardless of persuasions, but we have to be honest here, minorities are always going to get the brunt of that. And I'm looking at the party that is not going to sell me with an election speak or make me empty promises. I'm looking for the party that's actually going to do something. And I think, you know, my third biggest issue is our economic impact of where we are right now. Because it frightens me as Americans to see that, you know, we're still playing games with gas. We're still trying to bounce back from everything we've done. But a lot of Americans have lost jobs due to the pandemic. There's been things that have impacted all of us differently in how we work, how we move forward, how we pay those bills. And these are things that I don't think the party is doing right now to address. And how we bounce back is very important. Like, you know, I'm not a fan of our last president, but I do know we had stimulus checks coming. With our current president that I voted for now, I see things with the student loans coming slowly, but is it enough? Is it what was promised? You know, what do we deserve as Americans to help bounce back and recuperate our economy faster? And on top of that, how do we go into this next winter and possible future outbreaks of the pandemic and prepare accordingly with the same government having disagreements on basic things that are a win-win for all Americans, regardless of our affiliation. But, you know, our democratic system has to do better. And I think that, you know, until the parties actually do things for the American citizens that put them in office, and instead of for their own personal agendas, we're not going to succeed as a country.
So healthcare, racial disparities, and economic issues are top of mind for you. And I hear you saying that you want to see our politicians work together to address the challenges that are before us.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right, Chris, let me go back to you. Give us a sense for you of how you mentioned climate change, and you mentioned I'm forgetting the other issues that you mentioned right now, but you can remind us of that. But how are you thinking about how you might vote this fall?
I guess quite simply, non-radical. I guess that would be my best way to, yeah. I think that we probably mostly could all agree that the Democratic side likes to push a lot of gun control and stuff. And I do want there to be a lot of mental health actions taken. I have no problem with background checks. I'm not that guy that's like everybody should have a gun whatsoever. But I think that there's a lot of different House bills on the table that maybe go too far. Historically speaking, and these are instances that aren't talked about much, but a lot of mass shootings have been resolved before they became one because we had an armed citizen on site that was able to resolve it. But you don't hear about that. So
The guns is another important issue for you.
Well, it is. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So it's tough because like I had mentioned before when we met last week, being a union member, typically the Democratic Party supports union workers and AFL-CIO, all that stuff. So it's very difficult for me, and even the guys I work with. We're very you got a lot of roughnecks, we'll say. So you got guys that are hunters and just the kind of outdoorsman kind of, not to say that that's the more Republican kind of gentleman, but in my experience, it seems that way. But so I'm gonna lean Republican. I just don't think that the Democratic Party quite has our best interests in Pennsylvania in mind, but hindsight's always 20/20. You never know what you're going to get with these guys.
Yeah.
They can do something else, and there's a lot of snake oil salesmen out there. Everybody knows that.
Let me ask you too. So, and I remember the other issue that you mentioned was you're concerned about some of the gender issues that are the issues that are being discussed in schools and how that's being handled in terms of in the curriculum and then you also, for you, so give us a sense of what's a life experience that helps us to understand where you're coming from and how you think about the issues that are top of mind for you in this election. Or, a life experience or life experiences that kind of shape how you look at politics.
Sure, and I don't want to offend anybody by saying something's liberal or anything like that, but that's just kind of the way my mindset's been working and everything. But they're pushing gender ideology and everything like that. It's just so much more mainstream media now. There's issues with Disney because of this. They're boycotting, and it's like kind of, some people will say cramming it down your throats. I wouldn't quite say that. You can decipher what your kids can view and not view, but everyday television, which it probably isn't great for your kids anyway, it's just it's there, and that's fine. But it's just younger and younger and younger being exposed to it, normalized, and it's not. So for example, I was in ninth grade when I had a physical education class that talked about sexual education, and this is how you put a condom on a banana, and these are the STDs you can get when you sleep with somebody. And now my fifth grader is getting the same class. So why did it go so far forward? Fifth grade, he's 10 years old. Where I was 13 getting the same class, so it's just kind of weird. And you kind of, at least they're giving you the information that they're getting this class, and if you want them to not attend it, you can excuse them. But I just thought, that's interesting. Me, I'm like, well, I don't know. Maybe she sees more of the curriculum than I do, but she tends to take a bit of issue with a lot of the curriculum that they're kind of putting out there. And I think that that's more so the liberal side that's pushing that agenda. We tend to believe that a lot of the teachers, you see it in the media, so I'm not really quite sure, but it seems like you're kind of chastised if you were a Trump supporter in school, and you were chastised, for certain beliefs. And it just kind of seems that like all the teachers they're all kind of liberal leaning, left leaning. And if you have a kid that comes into school with a shirt that says this about a political participant, then they're in trouble. They're suspended. It's like, well, you can't quite do that, you know?
Got it. Got it. Yeah. All right. Thank you for giving us that little bit of that background on where you're coming from. Stacy, I want to go to you. Give us a sense of a life experiences or experiences that shape how you think about politics and voting. Oh, Stacy, go ahead and unmute yourself. Oh, Stacy, you're still unmuted. There we go. We'll get it.
There you go. Okay.
Great.
So in the early 90s, after my divorce, I was a single mom and I was denied housing 17 times based on being a mother. They would tell me, well, we just don't want single moms here. And I'm like, you're breaking federal law. You know, I saw fair housing, literally, I had 17 positive counts of discrimination, housing discrimination. And I could never figure out why, you know, in this town, you know, I haven't had the greatest ride here. Not, you know, I mean, it is what it is. But so I've always questioned that, you know, and we are heavily, heavy historic Caucasian community, and I just, you know, since I'm Iberian and I identify more in a Latina, or, you know, there's really no, you know, Iberian classification. It's a genetic.
Stacey, go ahead and speak up a little bit more. Some people are having a little bit of trouble hearing you. There you go.
Okay, so it is, you know, ethnicity, but I realize that I'm slightly ethnically ambiguous. It is kind of what I've come to realize, and my grandchildren are part El Salvadorian, and my son-in-law, you know, he says, well, you know, I can't drive in certain part of the town after 10 o'clock because I get stopped. And I'm like, yeah, you know. And what really struck me the other day, my 8-year-old granddaughter, she looked at me and she goes, Nona, I'm a brown girl. And I said, yes, you are. And she had a worried look on her face. And that struck my heart. So, you know, and so what we're talking about really, because I look at food deserts in Black communities, and what we're really talking about is the spectrum of shades of color, and that, you know, dictate who gets what in this world. And I just think that's wrong. And I want to get to humanity. I want, because if none of us have justice, if not everybody is equally represented under the law that is guaranteed by the Constitution, none of us have justice. None of us have equality, because we are not islands. We are dependent upon each other. And you would think after so many hundreds of years, we would get over this, you know, but like I said, I live in a state that, you know, during Black Lives Matter, I had Confederate flags all over the place. And, you know, I won't say the word of the bumper sticker, but it was FBLM with the word. It wasn't F. And I was like, at first I was like, wow, they must have a thing about the Bureau of Land Management. I'm like, oh yeah. So we see this every day. I hear comments every day that I don't know if they're unaware of what they're saying, but I just, you know, because I believe racism hurts the racists just as much as it hurt, when we talk about, when it comes down to, you don't know if your child is coming back home because you don't know if they're going to be murdered by going to the store. I'll get in the line and I'll make that my issue. I'll make that my first issue because I know my child's probably coming back home just because I'm on a lighter part of the spectrum. So
Yeah,
anyway,
I hear
that
the
is
passion in
really
your voice.
my heart.
Yeah,
That
no,
is
I hear the passion in your voice, and thank you for sharing a little bit of that background of where you're coming from. I want to go to Carlos, and then folks, we're getting close to the part of the forum here where we want to hear from you. So don't raise your hands yet, but start thinking about your questions for the speakers and or experiences that you want to share that influence how you're thinking about the 2022 election. So Carlos, let's go to you. Give us a sense of a life experience or experiences that has shaped how you think about politics and the 2022 elections. Carlos. And go ahead and unmute yourself, Carlos. And let's see, did we lose Carlos? Calling Carlos. Does anyone see Carlos? All right, he must have dropped off accidentally. So let me ask you, Christopher and Stacy, from listening to each other and also to Carlos, what did you learn about how the other people see themselves, and did you see anything in common? And just take a minute to think about, just take a minute in your response to address that. What did you learn about how other people see themselves, and did you see anything in common? Stacy and Chris.
Who do you want to go first?
Either of you. Stacy, go for it.
Okay, I did. I heard concerns for Chris's children as a father. I heard Carlos speaking about the plight of the workers during COVID, and so these really come to, whatever side we're on, the liberal or the conservative, we're human beings. And so this was a really good opportunity for me to hear from another side of the political divide, I will say, because it has been a divide in their human concerns of being a father and also of being a medical worker who has seen so much death. So it's really a good practice to find neutrality and allow other people's perspective. Otherwise, we have no solutions because we're in all of this together. And we're all human beings. So I really heard the empathy in the voices of the other two. And, it's refreshing and it's hopeful. And it is a refresher going into the 2020 midterms.
Yeah, thank you. Chris, how about you?
Writing that.
Chris, how about you? What did you learn about how the other people see themselves, and did you see anything in common?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think Stacy is one of the most compassionate people I've ever spoken with or heard from. I mean, she just has a incredible compassion, which I admire incredibly. Sometimes, I think, and this wouldn't be something maybe that we had in common. It would almost be something opposite. But it's just hard to say because the compassion for we'll call it skin tones. I certainly have. I'm also a type of person that believes you earn it. We obviously have Kamala Harris as our first vice president of color, correct? So she earned it. I do believe that. There's a lot of prominent and very successful Black people. Is it disproportionate in the United States? I would say yes. I think she's correct there. Are there things that we need to change and do? Are there things that are systemic that are wrong in this country? Absolutely. But it's not all. You can't place it all there. We can certainly say statistically that there are more Black lives killed by Black people than there are cops. That's a fact. It's irrefutable. So that's a problem that the media doesn't want to draw really attention to, and nobody really wants to address. So, we could talk about Black fathers not being there for their kids, and we could say the same thing about white men because that exists too. It's not that it doesn't. There are so many
commonalities, and there's probably some differences there that if you were to go into it, but you see commonalities there on the basic values.
Yes, and the compassion is there, and that's amazing. It is, and yeah, I've seen it here. I live right outside Philadelphia, and I know the BLM deal. I know the people that are against it and say all lives matter, and I get it. Blue lives matter. To me, that makes sense. Is it okay to take away from Black Lives Matter? Probably not. Cooler heads will prevail. There's never cooler heads at these rallies, at these Black Lives Matter protests. It's, we're sick of it. We're gonna, there's a woman going to jail now because she took it too far with the police, and she was a BLM protester. You also have corruption within BLM that can't be refuted either. That's a fact. They're facing federal charges for.
Chris, I know we could go more into this, and I wish we could have had the time to do it. I do want to go to Carlos and hear from him.
Sure.
Carlos, I think you're back, Carlos. We lost you for a little bit. Carlos, if you're back, can you give us a wave and say something? Unmute yourself. Oh,
Definitely.
There we go. All right, great. There you are. Carlos, give us a sense of a life experience that has influenced how you think about politics in the 2022 elections.
Well, I guess the most enlightening life experience possibly was the election of the president before our current president, and just seeing how America went into a spiral. And while, look, I could respect a lot of views, I think, we share the same views as on gun policies. Like at the end of the day, that's my right to carry. That's every American's right. Anything that we fought for and bled for is not something that the government has a right to take our rights away. And the right to bear arms is the people's right. So I'll give him that all day. And I guess just where we agree to disagree is just the impact of that last president and what it did to society, and how I think we took 20 steps backwards into the Stone Age. Because look, I do agree that there's too much in society that divides us, not enough that brings us together. But when I was in the military, I didn't worry about Black, brown, white, Asian, man or female. I had to worry about who was covering my 6 and how I was going to get home to my 4 kids and to my wife, because look, that's what mattered. And I understand, and a lot of people don't understand that while we're all providing a service and a sacrifice for our country, we're doing so for politicians and empty wars that just endanger our lives for no freaking reason. And I say that because the value of a life is something that we have yet to identify here on a lot of different platforms. And I say that because, look, at the end of the day, if we're judging people still today by things like skin color, and we're talking about movements like Black Lives Matter, the only reason we're talking about it is because it was nationally televised, the execution of a man while somebody stood there on his knee. And at the end of the day, that seemed very common. And that's something that should never be common. And keep in mind, I'm Puerto Rican, so I'm part Black. I have my nephews that are Black and Puerto Rican. I'm technically from Brooklyn, New York, guys. So I come from that hood and I come from Philadelphia. So I'm very well versed in what these neighborhoods are. I come in them, I grow in them. I'm a product of one. I work in a hospital that's very dangerous. We got gunshots happening right outside our ER every day. So trust me, I'm positive. I'm very sensitive to what's being said here, and I do love the platform. But the one thing I will have to say I strongly disagree on is anybody that aims to divide us as Americans and doesn't bring us together is and will always be identified as a dictator, not a unifier. And it ain't that I didn't like Trump, I didn't like his views, and I didn't like the people he supported and the people he cannot unsupport. Because keep in mind, look, Republican, Democrat, that's all fine and dandy. Even flying your Confederate flag. Well, I don't appreciate that. It's something I can respect because that's your right. But when you start supporting hate, you got to understand one thing about Black and brown people in this country. There's going to be the point in time that we stop looking for justice and we look for revenge. What happens then? If we're talking about statistics, be very afraid, because if you add all the minorities together, all the homosexuals together, everybody that helped build this country, the stones that we actually walk on, the streets that were built, they were built by people, immigrants. And technically we're all immigrants to this land. But I caution that because look, pandemic, protests, police accountability, we have yet to make real movement on any of these things. We cannot lie to ourselves and say just because we have protests, we are going to have systemic racism even be touched at the mere spectrum, because that's not what's going to happen. What's going to make that happen is going to be difficult conversations like this, gentlemen that come to the table with different views and can actually articulate that with class. And we can share each other's backgrounds and stories. And I believe when we do so, we can have a lot of common ground. Because I'm pretty sure there's a lot of things Chris and me will have in common, being military, being fathers, possibly not having the best upbringing. And he said a key word, earn your keep. I'm a strong believer in that, because I don't care what your ethnicity is, everybody has to earn their keep. You know, and I just want to say this before I'm cut off. And I understand that, you know, a lot of people are going to be touchy on the topic of homosexuality and how that's shared and expressed in the world. But we're going to have to come to terms that it's possibly the job of the parents and the people at home to start having these conversations with our kids so that society doesn't have to, because it's here. And the thing is, we have to understand as Americans, everybody has the right to do as they please. That's what makes this great. So rather
Take about 15 more seconds, Carlos.
If we agree with the lifestyle or not, it's here. And how we deal to educate our people and welcome everybody is how we exercise being Americans moving forward.
All right. And Carlos, one thing I appreciated about what you said is you highlighted some points of common ground, and you also said, but look, here's some differences that I see. And I just want to highlight that because that is something that we at Braver Angels very much believe in, that it's not just about finding the common ground that's important. It's also about noting and clarifying and better understanding where there are differences and building a relationship with each other in the process. So I appreciate that, Carlos, about you bringing that out. We want to now go to, we have a poll, and Hank, I want to go to you and see if we've got a link to a poll for people to tell us of the issues that have been mentioned. What is top of mind for people here in the Zoom audience? So Hank,
we're all set. You have the link. You have the QR code on your slide.
All right.
And Dave and Apple has the link in Leap Chat.
Excellent. All right. So what I'm going to do here, so go ahead and click on that link that's in the chat, and that's going to take you to a poll, and you're going to be able to say of the issues that have been mentioned here thus far, and you're going to be able to add your voice to raise new issues as well. But of the issues that have been here raised thus far, which issues are most important to you? And you can click on that link. You can also just get your smartphone out and use your camera app and point it at this QR code. There's two different ways here. You can go to that poll and make your voice heard.
David, should I explain what kind of poll this is?
Yes, please do, Hank. Thank you.
This is a ranked choice voting poll. And so you get to vote on every issue. How important do I think this one is? And the easy way is start out with the one you like the most, and then go to the next, and then go to the next. You can only have one number one, and one number two, and one number three, and etc. down the line. There are eight choices altogether. And the way ranked choice voting works is that think of it as rounds. In the first round, the issue with the least votes drops down to the bottom for the moment, and that person's individual other choices are then allocated to the remaining ones, and so it's round after round after round. And at the end, we end up with a list of issues that reflects where this group is very individually. If you had 50 or 60 other folks here, you'd end up with a different order maybe.
All right. Great. Well, thank you, Hank. Thank you for doing that. We're gonna look at those poll results in just a minute. While you continue voting, noting your rankings there, I'm gonna set up this next part here. This is what we call Q&E time, questions and experiences. So the way this works is you can either ask a question of one of the speakers, and if you do have a question, I ask that you keep it to 1 minute or less and do actually ask a question. And or you can make a comment and share an experience responding to the question, what's a life experience that has shaped how you think about politics and the issues that you care about in politics? Don't raise your hand yet. Keep your hands down until we invite you to do that. So either ask a question of one of the speakers or weigh in with your own comment on a life experience that influences how you will be voting in the 2022 elections. And if you do make a comment, please keep it to 3 minutes or less. So now, we do want to hear, we want to hear from a balance of people from across the political spectrum. So if you raise your Zoom hand, just rename yourself to R, B, or O for red, blue, or other. Red meaning you lean conservative or Republican, B meaning you lean liberal or progressive or tend to vote Democratic, and O meaning you're an independent or you're a part of another party. So R, B, or other, rename yourself so we can see where you're coming from, so we can make sure that we get a balanced of views from across the political spectrum. Now, if you prefer, you can also just message our Q&A manager, who is named as such in the participant list, Q&A manager Morgan Holly. You'll see his name in the participant list. And if you like, you don't have to raise your hand. You can just chat Morgan. Yeah, Morgan, raise your hand for us so we see you. There we go. I'm going to spotlight you. So where'd you go? Oh, shoot, I lost you. Well, anyway, Morgan, I was going to try to spotlight him. Morgan is there you can just say your name and whether you're red, blue, or other, and give a 1-sentence preview of your comment if you have a comment or a question and to whom your question is directed. So, all right. So now I do invite you to raise your hands now. But again, if you are raising your hands, please rename yourself to R, B, or O so I can make sure that there's Morgan. Call on that guy there. Morgan Holly is there. You can chat him if you don't want to raise your hand. And you're in good hands with Morgan. Thanks, Morgan. We can take the spotlight off of you now. All right. So I am going to, the spotlight's back on you, Morgan. We're going to remove that. There we go. Okay. Let's look at the poll here. All right. Let's see here.
I put the results link in your chat.
Excellent. So I am going to share my screen here. Give me a moment here. And let's look at what we found. So Hank, tell us what we're seeing here. Interpret this. What we're seeing, that number one issue is the harm of political rhetoric.
Yeah, and that's 17 votes. So there are more folks who can get their vote in. Have at it, folks. And then the next one is widespread inequities and racial ethnic inequities, political showboating. And then you can read the rest down. I think it's I would have not guessed that this would be what it was, but that's why we took the poll.
All right. And so now at this point, you have the opportunity to raise your own issues. So I'm going to go to Dennis Lalver first. And Dennis, do you have a question or do you want to share an experience?
Thank you for letting me talk. I'll go quick. I'll share my experience in the 80s after I graduated from college. I worked in Washington, D.C. long enough to know that I did not want to live and work in Washington, D.C. the rest of my life. But I learned a couple of things that are pretty valuable. Politicians that we see on TV and in the media, they're human beings. I didn't agree with Tom Harkin, senator from Iowa at the time, was considered to be fairly liberal in the scheme of things. But you know what? He's a human being. And when you got off this subject and said, tell me what it was like to be a pilot during the Vietnam War, he would talk and talk and talk and talk because he just welcomed the opportunity to get off the subject of politics. And I had that same conversation with people, that same level years later with, one person who was an ambassador during the Trump administration, and had a chance to talk to him and just said, let's get off the subject of politics. And then when they open the door and talk, that opens the door to other discussions. Back in the late 90s, I had a conversation with my former boss, and I complained to him about the terrible process of adopting, which my wife and I had gone through twice. We've done international adoptions. And that conversation led to a change in federal law that has made it a lot easier since 2000 for everyone who's ever adopted internationally. Within the last 3 weeks, I back in discussions with Senate Judiciary Committee staff on an update to that bill. And I have no time for partisanship. We're going to be nerds and we're going to get into the polity aspects of this, and no divisiveness. We're going to focus. And lo and behold, by focusing and stop being divisive and not repeating stuff we see on TV or on the radio, we're making progress. We're not there yet, but stuff's moving forward to update this bill passed in 2000. Last thing I'd say, at one point I remember having a conversation with somebody, and every, AOC and, that congresswoman and just stereotyped everyone as a Democrat. And I said, no, that's not legitimate. No different than just because Stephen King said, well, since when did white supremacy be a bad term? Doesn't mean that every Republican thinks that way. No, focus on the policy, look for the things at the end of the day that are really going to matter. And that's their personality and the issues. And you'll find a lot more common ground when we take that position. And when you have common ground, you can get stuff done. I'll shut up.
Thank you, Dennis. So you'd like to see a kind of a pragmatic focus on the issues and diving down and solving the challenges. All right. Yes?
That person that was the ambassador in the Trump administration said to me, Dennis, we've realized you're not a partisan Republican. You are a policy-driven Republican. And I just shut up at that. And we talked about his wife and the fact that he and his wife adopted internationally. And we just jumped on that. And again, find things we've got in common that at the end of the day aren't partisan.
All right. Thank you. I want to go to Kay Halpern. Kay, go ahead and unmute yourself. And do you have an experience you want to share or a question for a speaker?
Well, an experience, actually,
Go for it.
two experiences. So one thing is I had an incredibly wonderful experience through Braver Angels, through the one-on-one red-blue conversations. And I was able to get to know a guy named David Owinski, who, may he rest in peace, he passed in April. And he was very, quote, red. And yet we became really good friends. He was an amazing person. And the lesson that I learned from that, and that he modeled so beautifully, is he was a really good listener. And when you're speaking with anyone, and especially people whose views on a number of subjects, not all, are very different from your own, if you listen to each other, then you can connect. And that was just one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. And I later found out that he had many of these friendships. You know, it was all during the pandemic, so it was all on Zoom. And so that was an incredible experience. The second thing that I want to talk about in terms of my experience is that I am very concerned about where the divide in this country, as people have talked about, and where this country is going. You know, yes, there are extremists on both the right and the left, but I see a lot of the extremism, you know, kind of got a huge push from the previous occupant of the Oval Office. And that is extremely dangerous. And it leads to a breakdown of public discourse, extreme distrust, and authoritarian dictatorship. And I grew up partially in Eastern Europe, and I studied in Moscow, and I know the fear of a society like that. And it's the opposite of the freedom and liberty that we as Americans hold so dear. So those are just kind of two
Excellent.
experiences.
Thank you, Kay. And I want to go to Rob Kuhn, who is coming from other / independent perspective. And then I'm going to go again to another red, blue, and other. And then Celine, I know that you're next in line there too, but stay muted. Chat me and tell me, give me a sense of your political leaning, just to make sure I'm calling on a balance of speakers. But I do want to call on you, Celine. But Rob, right now, and Rob, do you have a question or a comment, Rob?
Say again?
Do you have a question or an experience you'd like to share?
Comments.
Go for it.
And then a question.
Oh, we can only do one.
Okay.
So
All
go ahead,
right, well-
go ahead and share an experience.
All right. I'm going to talk about 77 years of experience. I'm a retired Air Force colonel. I'm a retired defense industry executive. I spent a lot of years in the Pentagon, so I know the Washington scene pretty well. And like the previous speaker, I'm very concerned about the current political division or chasm in our country that doesn't seem to be getting any better, no matter how hard we try. And it is my belief that the extremes on both sides are controlling the political narrative, and the centrists have no voice anymore because of this situation. Some of the speakers have illuminated the left-wing extremists, but in spite of the criticism that Joe Biden got, calling the extremists on the right, and that's all who he was talking about, semi-fascist MAGAs, he was right. And particularly the lady who lived in Eastern Europe, and I visited Eastern Europe, and I can tell you that description fits what's going on. On the left, you see violence, but you don't see attempts to overthrow the government. You don't see crazy people screaming and yelling at Congresswoman Jayapal's house, in front of Congresswoman Jayapal's house at 3 o'clock in the morning. You don't see leftists attacking FBI offices because Donald Trump told them that the FBI was an enemy of the state. And so I don't know where we're going, because the dialogue's not changing, because the extremists simply will not allow the dialogue to change. So that's my experience based on 77 years of living in this country and voting Republican most of my life, but that's changed. Now I don't know who to vote for. I'm one of Adam Kinzinger's politically homeless right now.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you, Rob. All right, so we've heard from one red leaning person, one blue leaning person, and one other / independent. Salim, go ahead and jump into the fray here. Do you have a question or an experience you'd like to share about what's on your mind about the 2022 elections?
I'd like to share an experience if that's
Yeah, go for it.
possible. Okay. So, as you can tell from my name, I see the world in a whole different place that they call the United States. I'm an indigenous American, and I hear words like critical race theory, and people talk against that because of feelings. Well, I would sit in a classroom and I would hear how my people were savages, they were unrelatable, needed to be dominated, things like that. So when I hear about political parties, I don't hear red, blue, or anything. I hear another group of people who are at the top and don't listen to those at the bottom. I think Benjamin Franklin said it the best is, and Martin Luther King quoted it after, that an injustice anywhere in the world makes a problem for justice anywhere in the world. And I might be paraphrasing that in a little bit, but from my perspective, I've studied the Constitution and will be taking my bar next year. One thing that I see is a bunch of parties that talk about a divide. They talk about putting things back together, but we don't listen to everyone. We listen to those that we want to talk with. The reason why Black Lives Matter is so much of a forefront and talked about now is because nobody could turn the TV off. These are things that people that look like me have been saying for centuries, and nobody has cared. They passed it under. So where I look at the travesty in American politics is something that's been consistent my life, and I'm 46 years old now. I may not be living in 70 years as the person previous to me, but I know that in my neighborhood, in the places that I'm from, I'm an elder and I'm only 46. I'm in the middle of my life. So what has politics ever done for somebody like me? They overlook us. They don't listen to us. So if we're going to have a candidate, they're talking about mending the divide. Let's start looking at things of a human tragedy instead of what political affiliation you are, what color you are, what gender you are. Stop doing that. Stop feeding into the narratives where if a Black person says something, oh, well, we don't have to look at it that way. But if a homosexual says something, or if a Mexican or anybody like that says something, we always have to play this game. Nobody's been treated worse than Blacks in this country. And until somebody can stand up and say politicalness, that we need to correct these issues because this is a human issue, then we're never going to get anything further. So as long as we have red, purple, blue, green, polka dot, anything like that, you're already segregating people by calling them white, Black, brown, red, yellow. So if we're going to do this and do it for real and people stop being keyboard warriors and really start activating that pineal gland to get to a higher level, then we need to start looking at it as human problems. Because we'll quote Martin Luther King all day before 1964, but we'll never quote out that his last book, Where Do We Go From Here, where he talked about the progressive people and how they would be the cataclysm of our failure. So when a politician talks about that, instead of privilege, 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 privilege entering the White House, oppressing other people, then we're never going to get anywhere. So that's my experience in that.
All right. Thank you, Celine. Celine, if I could just ask just a quick follow-up question. Do you feel like there's a political party or movement that kind of best represents the issues that you're most concerned about, or not necessarily?
Absolutely not. There's never been one.
All right.
Never. I've studied
right.
the Constitution. I've seen it from its inception, from the Articles of Incorporation. When you had Federalists and Whigs, it's always been an elite group to tell whatever they wanted, to tell other groups to keep them fighting, whether it's been fascist versus Marxist, socialist versus communist. It's never been anything to look at humans as humans.
Okay.
Never.
I hear you loud and clear. I have to go on to the next person, Celine, but thank you so much for jumping in here and sharing your
Thank you.
perspective. I want to go to Rita, and then I'm going to go to Indigo. Rita.
Thank you. I have a big concern that I don't think is either red nor blue
And Rita,
nor
hey, Rita, I'm just interrupting
It
your-
is
Rita, I'm going to ask you to stop your video and talk because it's coming across a little bit murky. I think you stop your video. I think we'll hear you just
Sure.
as well. There you go.
Is that better?
You betcha.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you so much. One of the things that I've been really taken aback by, and it really has been from the beginning, and that is what I see to be as intellectual dishonesty, where people, I don't care what side they're on, but when they say things publicly, and I mean things that we're seeing by through the airwaves on TV, or even on, which I'm not a big Twitter fan, but even in those the forums, when they say things that intelligent people, if they're honest with themselves, see that these people are not being, when they claim that they don't, when they claim certain things as an intelligent, mature person, I find it very difficult to believe that they believe that they think we believe everything that they say. If there is and one of the things that recently has really bothered me is the reports that I've been hearing about the Democratic Party that is and I have not investigated this fully, but the Democrats that are actually providing funding for Republicans in certain areas that are the least likely. They're not the best Republicans for the job, but the Democrats are inputting money toward those Republicans in order to make them the runner, so that the Democrat would do better against a Republican that would not do well in that area. So that's the dishonesty that I'm talking about, and I'm certain that there's dishonesty. I don't know that it's of the same ilk, but that's very concerning to me. And I'm wondering if any of the speakers have they given any of that thought in terms of the honesty of the people that they're listening to. Thank you.
Let's just leave that, let's leave that as a comment for now. And I know there was a question there, but I do want to get more people hear from more people here. Indigo,
Sure.
Let's hear from you. Indigo, do you have a question or an experience that you'd like to share?
Experience.
Mhm.
So I put B, but I had to really think about it. I have traditionally voted Democrat, but I'm kind of this year thinking more along the lines of do no harm. So I'm thinking more that I probably should not vote at all, because I cannot find anyone to vote for where I can sincerely in my heart know that I'm doing no harm. I would say that the personal experience, so I might get emotional talking about this because it's very personal to me. And it involves someone that I care very much about, which is my niece, who thinks she's my nephew. So when I first encountered this, I started researching it because I've always been a liberal. And so I just kind of accepted everything of those ideas. Of course, there's nothing wrong with being transgender. People should live how they want. But then when it became my niece, and I remember her being a happy little girl. I remember watching her play. I remember her when she first started developing breasts and how she would go on social media with her chest sticking out and so proud of herself. And then she had a schizophrenic break when she got further into puberty. And then next thing you know, over a course of a few years, the only friends she had are online people who she had to be taken out of school because of schizophrenic break. So she was online school, but then her only friends were online. And she fell in first with anime, and then that led to this transgender thing. And then the next thing, she's wanting to get her breasts removed and all of this stuff. So I had to start looking into this. And as I did, I think it's the sort of thing, like I understand why that ideology tries to stop conversation. Like why anytime you ask questions, you're called a bigot, you're called a Nazi, they try to shut you down, you're called a TERF. They hate TERFs, kill all the TERFs, because there is complete ideological capture of all of our institutions, media and social media, the way the moderation is done on social media. It's completely lopsided. And I think it kind of what they call red pilled me, because once I saw, like, I won't even give you any of what I learned, but it is staggering. It is just unbelievable the rate at which we are sterilizing children. It's unbelievable. And I understood, once I could see it on this issue, it unraveled and I started seeing it on all these other things. Like I never had a problem with getting the vaccine, but then I started being critical and I started seeing inconsistencies and understanding this capture of the news, of the social media, of the universities, of the magazines, where even the science that should be undebatable, there are two sexes, this should be undebatable. And yet it is up for debate suddenly. I mean, create just things that are so incredible. And it just brings me to this point of seeing, oh my God, I dare not give more power to the Democrats, because what might 7 states in which anyone can identify as a woman, including a serial rapist, and be sent to a women's prison where some poor woman has to room with that person and all the women have to shower with that person who still has all of their genitalia intact? What? Like, this is
Take about 15 more seconds to wrap up.
yeah. So these things are so indefensible to me. They're just such an offense to my sense of reason. And yet to even question these things is considered bigoted and shut down. And it just really concerns me about how is it even possible for us to come together from right and left when there's so much authoritarianism on both sides, misogyny, homophobia. I mean, let's talk about a lot of these kids being trans or gay kids, right? And when you look at it coming from both sides, you can't, they're controlling your mind, they're controlling your body, and I just don't know where to go. It's just overwhelming.
I hear the passion in your voice, and thank you for sharing. It's a difficult issue, and you shared it from the perspective of an experience that you've had. So thank you for contributing to the conversation here, Indigo. We are, there's so much more to be said here, and I wish I could call on everyone who has their hands raised, but we're at the point here where we have to make the switch here. We want to do another poll, and we're going to ask in this other poll, of all the issues that have been raised here tonight, including new ones that have been mentioned here during this Q&A time, which ones would you be interested in diving deeper on and exploring further? And I'm going to tell you about an opportunity that we'll have to regather a week from now and explore that, see what we might do. But Hank, do we have this other poll up and ready to go? I'm going to, Hank, if you could unmute yourself. We can give you more time if you need more time, Hank. Let's give Hank more time.
No, it's ready.
It's ready.
I'm just about to give you the link.
All right. Feel free to just drop it straight into the.
Actually,
yeah.
Apple gets the link, and you get.
Well, feel free to drop
code.
it straight into the chat, Hank, yourself, if you're able to.
Okay, I can do that.
Great.
And here's your. Oh, that's not the QR code. Hang on.
All right. While he does that,
to everyone.
He's going to share the link where you can vote on this poll. And what we're going to do is a week from today, Monday, September 19th, there's the link, everyone, in the chat. Go to there and just, again, it's ranked choice and indicate of those issues that have been raised. And we weren't able to capture all the issues in the poll, but we tried to highlight the ones that were talked about the most. Of the issues that were raised, which ones would you be most interested in diving into further? And a week from today, we're going to gather. You're invited to come back here on Zoom, and we'll meet for an hour and to talk about, hey, okay, well, let's, of these issues that you want to dive into, you know, what could we do? We could do a common ground workshop. Brave Angels is a common ground workshop where you bring together an even number of people from both sides of an issue to explore what our common ground is on the issue. Or we could have another kind of workshop or forum to try to better understand, to dive deep into the issue and look for solutions. So register your rankings at that link. And then a week, we'll send you in the chat also, you'll see a link to the meeting for a week from now. And for anyone who wants the QR code for this link, I'm going to also show that to you while we close here. All right, so let me see here. Let me share my screen so you can see this is the QR code for that poll if you want to do it that way. But all right, so we're to close out here, we are gonna hear from our speakers, our first speakers again, and ask them what they're taking away from today's conversation. Before we do that, I do want to invite people who are not already members to consider joining Braver Angels and becoming a member. And so I do want to ask, let's see, who our second speaker who talked about her friendship with David Owinski. I'm forgetting your name. Are you still here? Is it?
Yes.
Kay, yes.
Yeah.
So you're a Braver Angels member, right, Kay?
Yes, I am.
So if I could just put you on the spot, if it's okay, why would you encourage someone who may not already be a Braver Angels member? Maybe this is their first time at a Braver Angels forum. In a minute or so, what would you say? What was the reason you joined Braver Angels, and why would you encourage somebody else to do so?
In a nutshell, it's an opportunity to have discussions about very hot button controversial topics, but in a civil, respectful way where you listen to people with opposing views and they listen to you. And you're able to have an honest, productive discussion. And now that hopefully, you know, the pandemic is sort of lessening a little bit. Before the pandemic, I was part of a local, well, I am part of a local Braver Angels chapter. And, you know, we met in person. And so when you're schmoozing and, you know, you're physically together in someone's living room, you know, it's a different, it's a different kind of ambiance, of course, than Zoom. And so to have the best of both worlds, you know, that physical contact and closeness with a smaller group of people meeting face to face, and also being able to listen, interact with people from all over the country on Zoom. That's kind of the best of both worlds.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes. All right. So you're part of the local Braver Angels Alliance. Okay.
Yes.
And
yes.
What's the name of that alliance?
Well, it's in Montgomery County, Maryland.
Oh, terrific.
And yes, there are, quote, Reds in Montgomery County.
Great. Yeah. Because that's the other thing is I encourage you all to go to the Braver Angels website, look under Get Involved and how to join an alliance, and see if there's an alliance in your area. And if there's not one, think about starting one. We can put you in touch with other Braver Angels members in your area. To join Braver Angels, just go to braverangels.org/join if you're not already a member, and join Kay and thousands of other people across the country in this movement to help bring people together to better understand our differences and find common ground and build relationships. So let's see, Hank, do we have the results of the poll?
Yes, we do. It's on your slide.
All right, it's on my slide. Okay. The results are on my slide, you're saying?
Let's see. What did we? Yes, we have the results. And did I give you the results link?
Let's see. Is the results link the same? No, okay.
No, here, I got it right here.
Okay, great. Let's see the results of this.
Here you go. Getting it to you now.
All right, great. And so in an email, follow-up email, we'll send you the link to register for this follow-up conversation a week from today, where we can talk about how we want to, what issues and how we could dive in deeper into some of these issues. So look for that in an email tomorrow. We'll send that to you. But let me see what's in this poll. So let me share my screen here. And all right, what are we looking at here, Hank? What are we seeing?
Okay, the number one issue that people would like to go forward with is fighting extremisms. And then the second one, which is very much related to it, is finding what's common. And to do that, you're going to need deep listening to each other as a human to a human. And if you want to get the full story, you got to listen to the bottom. What gets in the way of this is intellectual dishonesty and shutting down pragmatic conversations. And pragmatic focus, although I would argue that pragmatic focus is probably embodied in everything that was chosen here to get things done.
All right. All right. And of course, there were many other issues that were raised as well. And so come join us a week from now and we'll talk about it and see how we can dive deeper. And but for now, and then the evaluation, we want you to take some time after we're done here to fill out an evaluation, a feedback form for us to tell us what you thought about this forum, what issues you'd like to discuss in future forums. We do this once a month here at Braver Angels. It's all we always hear from everyday Americans on the issues of the day, just like we did today. And so that link is in the chat. Apple just put it there. So just copy that right now. And then right after we're done here, takes about 5 minutes, and then you can fill that out. They'll close us out. I want to go to our first speakers again. So again, Chris, Stacy, and Carlos, thank you again for taking time to join us. And I want to ask you, each of you, just in a minute or so, a minute or less, what are you taking with you from the conversation tonight? What are you taking with you from the conversation tonight? And Stacy, I want to start with you.
I just want to say thank you so much for having me here tonight. Especially after.
And Stacy, remember to speak up well so everybody can hear you well.
Especially after the conversations and the questions and comments that I just heard. I think, sorry, it's choking me up a little bit. I think the take home from this forum is the humanity that we all carry and how that humanity is on the line right now. It doesn't matter what side you are on. We are all human beings. And that's encouraging. You know, and I just want to reiterate something that Salim said, you know, unless every single person in society has justice and is free and is represented equally under the guarantee of our Constitution, none of us are free. And I just am so grateful to be a part of this conversation, to be a part of a platform that is asking people to go deeper and hopefully one day get to unity.
Thank you, Stacey. Chris, how about you? What are you taking with you from tonight's conversation? Oh, go ahead and unmute yourself, Chris.
Well, I guess the biggest thing I'm taking with myself is, I guess just pride in everybody, really, honestly, because I think it was great for everybody to kind of come together and talk about these issues without, vulgar language, getting upset with each other or anything like that. I think that there was times where maybe some trigger words were maybe put there, and maybe somebody took that on a tangent, and that's kind of what happens with these things. But in the future, I think future conversations would correct that and everything. So I just think that taking with me that this is a great platform format to discuss issues that everyday Americans have, and I'm thankful that I was invited to be a part of it and able to be a part of it, and for everybody's participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And let's go to Carlos. You get the last word. What are you taking with you from this conversation tonight, Carlos? Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Well, one of the things I'm taking is identifying how great of a platform this is, to have all the different views and to express them civilly without ridicule or judgment, because I think that's unfortunate what happens a lot of times when people are articulating their different views. but I will be taking away. I mean, look, a lot of the things that were said today were agreed upon. A lot of things weren't. I can respect different people's perspectives, but I must reiterate what was just said previously before. I think that, you know, I hope that from these conversations, we start valuing each other as people and as human beings, because as minorities and people from different backgrounds, we all suffer differently. And I think until we start being more humane with each other's purpose and putting aside all the political rhetoric that just separates us, we're not going to be able to achieve what greatness we do have as Americans and as human beings. But I appreciate everybody's comments, and thank you for allowing me to join on my first Braver Angels forum. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And Carlos and Stacy and Chris, hope to have you back at other Braver Angels events and forums in the future. And for everyone else here, hope to have you all back here at the We the People's Forum. And let's go out there and build a house united, everyone. Take care. Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thanks, David. Wonderful conversation.
Good night.
Night.